First item is item 6.1, is the minutes of our meeting held 26th of February. We've got a recommendation there on page 6. Can I have a mover, please? I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Member Marty, any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Item page 13 onwards, we've got our annual report plan update 7.1. Thank you, Caron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This probably should be titled Annual Report and Audit Plan for 2025 anyway. So the purpose is to advise Council of the audit plan, which is attached to this document, and to receive any questions on the audit plan and then subsequently the annual report. A couple of things to note, that the audit fees were previously presented as part of a 3-year report we get from audit quoting the 3 years of fees, and then we've since updated the audit plan recently received from Audit New Zealand. Now, some key dates have the I have a duplication in the timetable there. I have the interim audit listed twice. Anyway, we're currently going through some of the critical work that needs to be done in preparation for audit, and it's a revaluation year, so all of our assets will be externally revalued. We have the interim audit proposed for the 26th of May to the 6th of June. And then you will see the other timeframes that are listed in the report. Now, I have, in our timeframe, I've put the current possible adoption for the annual report and the audit opinion to be issued as Wednesday, the 29th of October. I'd like to come to a point about that in just a minute. Masterton are adopting on the 29th, and South Wairarapa are going for the 8th of October. So we've been in discussions with Audit New Zealand on trying to plan possibly either of those two dates, and we are proposed for the later date at this stage. One of the issues that we have to work through is that the 29th of October is we will not have our new council sworn in at that point. So we will have to work with that. And Philip, could you confirm that you raised this morning around the requirement of elected members to be elected and have no objections with this in time frame?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not an expert on this, but there was an amendment to the Electoral Act where the council can't be sworn in until such time as there is no possibility of a recount, or that if there was a recount ordered, that recount actually has to be completed before you can actually have the inaugural meeting. And of course, then you can't have any business until, is it 7 days after that? So so you've got to declare, right? Is there a recount? If there is, you've got to wait until that has been resolved before you can have your inaugural meeting. And then you've got to wait another 7 days. So potentially that could put some councils, if there was such a risk of a recount, adopting their annual report, if they don't adopt by the 8th of October, well into November, for no fault of their own, right? And we've talked to audit about that in terms of the audit opinion. I think it's a risk for a number of councils across the country, unless they've adopted early before the 8th of October. And there is no provision in the Act for the existing council to carry on. You actually all have a good job on the 11th.
So my request is anyone who's standing wins by a huge margin and no possibility of a recount.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Keep it light.
So that is part of the risks that are outlined in this report. And the other risk that's also outlined is that there are some organisational changes occurring at the moment, which will have some impact on the delivery of this work. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions on the annual report, sorry? Annual report and the associated audit process? There are none? Wow, okay.
May I ask a question of audit?
Absolutely, that's what they're there for. Yeah.
I just had a question. I did some potentially questionable maths, but it looks like there's an estimated 12% increase in the audit hours that is going to be taken on by you guys to manage our council, but a 50% increase in cost. I'm just wondering if you can help explain the significant increase there.
Set out in the audit proposal letter, and there will be the due to full revaluation of your property plant and equipment. It takes longer to audit when full revaluation is the fair value, which is what happened last year. So that has been reflected in hours, which drives the cost by the session that audit.
But this does cover 3 years. So if that's the case for this coming year, the two others, well, shouldn't that be then less again if it's not a revaluation year?
So there's two approaches that can be taken to getting audit fees. You can just move it over the 3 years so you don't get the peaks and troughs, or you can have it flat in the 2 years when there's no full revaluation and a spike. So at the time of discussing with council, the appointed auditor may have reached that agreement with council to that out, as opposed to having, a peak.
Awesome.
In the year of the full revaluation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. So we've got a recommendation there that we receive, when he receives the report and notes the 24-25 annual report timeline. Right? They yet to be confirmed.
And do we need to note the risk around that inauguration and
No,
local elections?
no,
Okay.
we just
Thank you.
no. I think it's just we don't know what that risk is until it crystallises. So all you've done, we've brought it to the attention in both the report. Okay. Okay. So do I have a mover for that recommendation? I'll move. Do I have a seconder? I think member Marty got there by skin of a teeth. Thank you. All right. Any further comments or questions? There are none. All those in favour, please.
I do have a comment.
Oh, okay.
I just would like to comment on the layout. I think it's great. So, thank you.
But could I just ask before we move to the resolution, then I assume move on to the next item. Is this an appropriate time now that we're back in public for audit to
Comment on
comment on
environment?
Yeah. Could we ask them to come back to the table and
okay.
for the benefit of the community?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the purposes of the public session, my name's Steve Walker. I'm Executive Director at Audit New Zealand. So not the one who's responsible for your audit. That's my colleague behind me, Karen Young. Probably just a couple of observations to keep it brief. I engaged with a lot of local authorities around the country, whether they be larger metros, district councils of all sizes and regionals. And there's no hiding from the fact that it's a sector under massive pressure at the moment. For the territorial authorities, a lot of that pressure is in the water reform space, so the local water done well space, and the implications of whatever consultations, preferred solutions that various territorials are working through at the moment. The observations that we see from an audit perspective are generally ring-fenced to an annual reporting process or a long-term planning process. For district councils, invariably it's the same people involved in the planning processes, the reporting processes, and for this year the preparation of local water service delivery plans, obviously being developed on the back of consultation with communities. So an acknowledgement of the pressure that the sector is under and the constraints that it puts on particularly finance planning reporting teams to have to grapple with all of those things. From our perspective, it's critical that we are clear about our expectations of local authorities. We worked well to come up with agreed timelines. We clearly have some expectations around delivery and good process, good project planning, etc. And we've had good engagement with the council team here. But I think on the back of recent years' experiences, there's no doubt some things we want to do differently in the way we engage with council, just as council have identified some opportunities for improvement themselves. One of the things that we are making available to all of our client base, whether that be in the local or central government sectors, we are doing more online events. Some of those are targeted at different sectors, and we are targeting some of that towards local government in areas where we see challenge and risk, whether that be around valuation of infrastructure assets, whether it be around service performance reporting to your communities. And those are areas that we are more than happy to engage with council on, and certainly we'll be making sure that council have access to, there's a range of materials already on our website, but other events that will be performed as well. So it's more an acknowledgement of the pressure that the sector's under, and I'd love to say it's going to get better, but I actually think the sector's going to continue to be under pressure until local water done well sort of is settled and decisions have been made, entities have been established. Equally, I know in the Resource Management Act area, there's a lot of reform underway, a very ambitious government program of legislative change in that space that will have a huge impact on all local authorities over the next few years as well. So we will do our part to work with council. As I mentioned sort of to this committee earlier, our primary audience is the community, and we obviously serve that via the elected representatives, the council here, and obviously working very closely with management through Jeff and Karen as well. So looking forward to engagement with council through this year.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got 2 recommendations on the report. Is it a move and a seconder? Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Next item 7.2, report on the planning model. Thanks, Steve and Poe. You can listen to the rest of our meeting, or you can quietly slip away. Next item is the page, starting on page 53. Take your report as read. Karen, anything really you'd like to highlight to the committee?
No, it's a technical report. It's very system focused, very financial modelling focused. I'm happy to answer any questions on this. But as we know, we've done quite a lot of work in our systems, processes, and our financial modelling through Magic. And we did the work with them alongside us to get that we feel confident in our system and processes. So this is my understanding that this, the committee asked for this report last time for an assurance that we had completed the work and we were comfortable with it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So what we have done over the last few years is move from an enterprise-based financial model, which is essentially housed inside our own council servers, to a cloud-based model. And what this review did was move that cloud-based model to the most current version that the financial software provider has available operating in local government. So we've essentially migrated from in-house cloud-based, a copy of what we had in-house, moving from what we copy in-house to our most current version. What we asked Rhonda and the team to do as part of that review was just to go back and look at what may have changed and what's and that was the $22,000 that we talked about that was slightly different between the two. Moving to the most current version has limited the amount of user input fields that are available for change as part of the plan, and it improves the amount of ability for us to input single sets of data that update multiple parts of the plan without us also needing to update multiple parts of the plan. It's not, so I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it is, you know, we are going through a process of refreshing and updating and ensuring that the software and the models, particularly the budgeting models that we are using, are the most available and the least customised that we can have, so that we have greater confidence.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. First one was something with regards to Magic. You've made comments before, Jeff, that it's not the best system that you've seen used in your prior experience in commercial. Is this the system that all councils use? It's just low-level councils? Is there something that we should be looking at in a longer term to be changing out of Magic, or is this fit for purpose? I've used SAP, JD Edwards. I've used large-scale enterprise financial and software systems. They are very different and very expensive. And I think you go down the scale when you get to Tech One type system and Magic, and there's a number of software providers within the Wairarapa. Masterton and South Wairarapa also use the Magic system for financials, so that gives us a little bit of cross-pollination and a little bit of comfort. It is a cheaper solution, and as a consequence it ends up having a much clunkier user interface, and it's quite hard to drive standard reporting from. That's why I've made comments previously, but we cannot afford a larger package. I think at this stage, in terms of long-term plan for our software system, the structure of the council needs to be sorted first. So a local water done well needs to be resolved, and any kind of amalgamation conversation happen amongst councils before we look at changing our financial system. Prefer to do that. I have more comfort now that we're using a standard cloud-based software package and model for our budgeting and planning. It's harder than I would like it to be. Better than it was.
It's better than it was.
Great. Thank you.
much better than it was.
Can I add to that what you've said is hopefully reinforcing my observation. There's no perfect system. There's probably about 4 or 5 local authority ones in local authorities, right? The biggest challenge with local authorities is a word beginning with R. That's the rates module. Because right, but JD Edwards, the other commercial products, no one else uses rates, right? So that's a problematic for local authorities is how you integrate. Right? And I know like plenty of regional councils decided to do their own rating, so they had to go and buy the rating packet. They bought, I'll say what it is, right? But they bought one of the companies. But my experience is all have flaws. There is no perfect system. All have advantages and disadvantages of cost versus functionality. I agree with what you said. Let's get the new form done before we decide what we're going to do. Any other questions? I've got one. Whether it's on page 56, the report writer refers to a third bottom paragraph, along with changes in the model in the plans compared with year 2 and variations to explain this result in 22, the reduction in 22,000. That's a calculation issue rather than a stadium costs.
It's a calculation issue.
Thank you.
And it's not rates required, it's reduced rates between 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Any further discussion? So do I have a mover for the recommendation? Oh, so Mo, you got a question? Sorry.
Chair, thank you. So just to clear, so you use the model for the 25-26
Annual plan.
annual plan.
Mhm.
Yep. So do you intend reviewing it again before the LTP?
Indeed.
Because it's a full 10 years.
Indeed. So obviously we found that the LTP model hadn't been reviewed and has subsequently been reviewed. We have now put in place with Magic regular updates, regular meetings, but also a training plan that will run 4 times a year to make sure that that we can spread that knowledge across the team, but that we are aware of any changes and checking and testing. And it's very thoroughly tested right now, but you're right, there's always updates, and sometimes those updates can cause a problem in the way the annual plan or the LTP may work. And there's always little idiosyncrasies that can pop out if something changes that we haven't done before.
Okay, and the second question is, does it cover the rates modelling?
The rates modelling is a separate system called IBIS, and that we are going to bring in-house this financial year. So we currently use an external consultant to run the rates modelling. And just for the benefit of everyone, the rates modelling is very separate to setting the budgets, and you have to advise the modelling system what the budgets.
Yeah, and can I just add a comment? Right? At the moment I'm playing also officer, right, in another council. So a lot of councils use IBIS or Breeze as their rates modelling software. It's probably the standard across. It's one of the standards across the country that most of the mid-size to smaller councils use. Right? So that's a good story, right?
The other thing we've also done is we've automated all the financial reports and all the funding impact statements directly from Magic. So we've just completed that in time for the annual plan.
Clarify. There's not one budget model, is there? There's 2. There's a long-term plan, financial, and an annual plan, which is just a single year.
It uses the same model. You have to extract out of the LTP model the annual plan. So next year, when we do year 3, you will be extracting from the LTP model. Yeah. So create another little mini version.
Little mini version of the model. And then we use that mini version leading years of an LTP.
Any other questions or comments? I was going to say, oh, just the way you were.
So, Mr. Chair, I just think it's great that we're making better use of Mandurah. So,
Yep.
it's great.
Thank you. So,
Positive steps.
so therefore you're prepared to move the recommendation that we received the report.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right, do I have a seconder? Does that, Mayor Ron, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Next item, 7.3, draft. There's an update on the draft annual plan. Page 7 onwards. Bit of
Thank you.
more bedtime reading. Thanks, team. Take it as read.
Right.
Any key highlights, further information?
Yep. Yes. Something we talked about last week at the workshop was the rates examples. And Jeff and I went through this with Rhonda on Monday. And first of all, the rates examples that were given were the same as the LTP. And we've since shortened that list because I think it was very hard to read. All of the outliers that were in that previous rates examples had good reason for that outlier. There were examples of people adding a dwelling to a residential vacant. Bearing in mind the residential vacant is a descriptor from QV and will be updated at a later date. So they had additional dwellings. One was quite a big dwelling. They had subdivisions, they had a swimming pool, they had reclassifications. So one of those outliers had a reason for that variation. So when you look at the two comparatives, it didn't give you that information. The data that we presented is from QV. So we take QV's data we take it every month and we reconcile it at least once a year to make sure that our rating database matches the QV database. So you can't set your rates resolution until you've checked those. So there was no reason for the outliers to be anything but that. And there was probably half a dozen in that list. The other reasons for some of the changes are around the number of services people receive, and that will change depending on the rate that they receive. The biggest component of the change in rates was really attributable to the depreciation rate in the water. And last year we had in the LTP, we had 50% funded. This year it's 75%. And next year it will be 100%, which is required under local water done well. So when we analysed and dug deep into the data, it's all there, it just changes. And I think the most difficult component of rate setting is you start with your budgets and then you put that into your revenue and financing policy and you determine the general rate first and the other UAGC rate, and then you go into targeted rates. So there will always be some people who benefit, those who don't. So the fundamental start of a rating process or the annual plan is what are our funding requirements we need to fund our budgets for next year, and then we apportion that across with different types of rates that we rate for.
Okay.
The other question you raised, Grace, was on the overhead allocation. The overhead allocation model didn't change. However, we changed the distribution between what was in admin and what was in the event centre. So we reapportioned some of the costs that were sitting in admin directly to the event centre. So in the first for those two groups, you'll see the admin took reduction of 554, and I think the community support took an increase of 487. So as we reviewed all the allocation costs that were in there, we realised that we could directly attribute quite a bit to the event centre and the library within that group of activities. So it was just a realignment of the overhead allocation model, not a change. And then there was the water races agreement to reduce their component over the next 3 years. That amounted to about 90,000 per annum. So it didn't materially affect the rates.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one.
Yeah.
Only one. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see me. Just, do you have any information on the number of ratepayers who challenged their QV?
Oh, the objections, I think it was, goodness, it went on all year. That was the interesting thing. I think it was around 50, wasn't a lot.
No.
And most of them were found in favour of the ratepayer.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And some of them wanted them higher.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But certainly we didn't receive a huge number, no. And they came through, took 6 months, I think, to get the final ones, and they weren't huge variations.
Was that an abnormal number, 50?
No.
It's pretty in line with
It's very much
previous years.
what they expected. We did have a couple of small ones that were small, but we went through the process. And I think it would be fair to say QV were very, they ran a tight process and they were very supportive of, and kept us very informed of any objections and why.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, this is the Risk and Assurance Committee, and I do think we are looking at a reputational risk here.
Yep.
In that we are telling people and they're expecting an 8.8%. In fact, almost everybody in Carterton is going to get a rate rise about twice that. Urban. And I find quite awkward considering this only really emerged, as far as we're concerned, last week. I don't really know what to say, but and I guess I should declare a conflict of interest here in terms of the high street commercial properties. We will be imposing a 25% rate increase on the commercial properties on top of a 25% rate last. And I'm not sure that's the best possible sector to be dealing with that.
Just supplementary to what Steve's just asked. If we'd remained at 13.2, where would that have been in a similar example? Would have been looking at 26%. So I think a reputational risk has reduced somewhat.
A little bit.
I still understand what you're saying. Yeah, I do think we're in a far better position than what we were going to be.
Look at the other way, we had projected a 13%, we didn't.
Yeah. Can I just say from a national perspective, this is a common problem across all local authorities at various times when they've got a revaluation, because we are required to say what our total rates is going to go up next year. We can't predict, and this is a challenge we have, which is the risk, right? We can't predict what's going to happen within various movements of types of properties.
This has got nothing to do with the revaluation. This is all to do with depreciation on the water assets. In the sense that we've gone from 50 to 75 to 100. And I don't think anybody around this table understood the implications of that. It might have been nice.
That's fair.
I think we.
And that's why we're going from 8.8 overall, practically zero on the rural properties, and twice that 8.8 in the urban area. It's not, it's going to take some thinking through.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the clarification. I think that's a really good point that we need to think about going forward as we change over a period of time, right? We need to actually think about what are the implications for those groups of ratepayers.
So maybe Jeff Karen, if you just give us off the top of your head what that would look like post 26 when WC stood up and we don't own the water assets. Because we've got to do an LTP review. Well, council will have to do an LTP review straight after that. And that's what Audit New Zealand's reminding us of. What's the likely implications? Because I think Councillor Lawrence's concerns are live.
I'm worried about from 1 July.
Yeah.
Next year it can look after itself. But
because this is the first step in a two-step process. So next year we'll have another change in depreciation from 75 to 100%. And so there's been that benefit occur in a revaluation year, but now we're playing catch up with depreciation, and that is going to impact for not just next year but the year after as well. So I think it's a fair question to ask beyond 1 year, because it will impact in year 2 as well, and that may change people's views on.
And if I could just, I think that was one of the debates we had at the start of the LTP, where people were saying, let's focus on the budget and how much you want to spend here and how much you want to spend there. But the other argument that was being pushed by some was, no, let's have a look at what we've got on our plate and first, and what is the state of the infrastructure and what do the numbers look like there before we then start saying, oh, we want to do this and we want to do that and we want to do this. Because that would have, your point is quite valid. It might have changed thinking had you had that picture in front of you right then and there. And I think that's brings that conversation back in.
Yeah. Can I ask a dumb question? Is there, are you saying it's required that we actually fully fund depreciation? Yeah, right. We are required by legislation, right, under the Local Government Act, to have a balanced budget, where as part of that process, we are required to ensure that we've got sufficient funding to pay for our renewals going forward. And the question I have, is there an over depreciation assessment compared with the renewals that we need to do in the future, or what's the difference between renewals and depreciation? Because that's, people think that depreciation is a magic number, right? It's an estimate based on your revaluation on your useful life and your valuation at the time. Whereas I'm looking at Johannes to the side of my eye, right? Hopefully his renewals are actually what it's going to realistically cost. Yes, they could change because of things, but I think that it would be a really useful analysis to actually, and maybe it's a bit late, right? But maybe for next year is 100% depreciation the right target? I know the DIA want that, but they don't understand that. Some people in DIA don't understand, right? That depreciation isn't perfect. You should be actually focusing on what is your renewals, because that's actually what the legislation actually really says. Comments? Right?
So I could.
What's the law?
Comments. At present, the process is we depreciate an asset, and that is depreciation is held in a reserve. And then when we need to spend capital money on renewals, we draw down on that reserve and use that before we use anything else. in waters, those reserves are depleted. So we have been using more capital in waters than we have depreciation saved up. So what happens after we use that reserve is we look at, is a portion of it growth and could we use development contributions? And then when we've gone through all of those options, we then borrow to, which I think comes back to Councillor Ayleen's question earlier on in the workshop, is could we borrow more and have rates lower? Now, at the moment, that within the waters assets, we are borrowing more because depreciation isn't sufficient, because we only are charging current year 50% depreciation, next year will be 75%. But as the depreciation rate goes up, we will have to borrow less because there will be more in the depreciation reserve. May not be sufficient, but borrowing will be less. So that is potentially a trade-off that council could make in keeping the depreciation rate lower and borrowing more. Now, that would be a change to the long-term plan and would require an amendment and to the long-term plan should we wish to do that. But that is the trade-off.
So just thank you for that clarification, because what I'm hearing, right, is that you actually need those depreciation income, right, to actually pay for your renewals, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that answers my question, because I haven't been involved, right? I have seen some councils, right, where they have over depreciated because they've done the renewals and there's nothing to do for another 30, 25 years, right? Because they've got new assets, right? And they're saying, oh, we need to start funding for the next 25 years when we don't know how long it's going to last for, right? So that's, but again, you're not in that situation, so thank you for answering that. So what I'm hearing is 100% is appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, the opposite of that, though, is the council, which does not fund any depreciation and fully borrows on all the capital expenditure. So, I mean, it's a choice which is made by the council in its financial strategy. And this is, to an extent, the chickens coming home to roost from decisions 2012 when it was decided to not fully fund depreciation, and so therefore the reserves didn't build up. And then again in 2018 when there was a decision to fund even less of the depreciation. So, and they were political decisions, not accounting decisions. So to keep rates increases low, not fund as much. If you do that and you end up borrowing more when you want to spend, then over time you've got the servicing of those loans, which will be the equivalent of having funded depreciation eventually. So it's all long-term impacts of decisions made, by prior councils.
Correct.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's a reputational issue going at the point at which you decide to catch up. The other thing, though, is the revaluation will increase the depreciation cost. And even if you've been fully funding up to that point, still going to have a shortfall in reserves that you've built in cash reserves. But can't avoid it.
Can I also just add, I totally agree with you about that borrowing, but actually I've done some modelling for another council. After 12, 15 years, you're actually paying more in your loan and interest repayments than actually if you'd already started. So all you're doing is putting off the evil day, right? Question.
Comment. There'll be a question in there somewhere. My thoughts are agreeing with what Councillor Lawrence has said with regards to reputational risk. It's a comment I made last week in our workshop on this, that there's a huge risk, in my opinion, with this 13, was going to be 13%, but it's going to be 8.6%. I think that's little comfort to anyone who are going to receive their rates bill, who had a big whopping bill last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. we're building and taking from the same pool of people that can't afford this level of rates increase. So the fact that there's been a 5% theoretical saving from a proposal in the long-term plan to what's actually put forward here doesn't make people feel happier. And what Councillor Lawrence said was the 8.6 is actually more like 15% for a lot of the people who live in town, which is half of our electorate or constituents. So I just feel that there's little comfort in that number, and there is huge reputational risk, not only with the reputation of Carterton Council, but for the councillors at the table here who wave the flag saying we'll do our best to make rates go down, and we've continued to push them up year on year at a significant level. And so I think a real risk to this council will be that in 5 months there's going to be a different table of people that poor Jeff's going to have to school up on how to do this job, because everyone gets tipped out because the rate's gone up too high. And comment to Marty's thoughts on borrowing versus the depreciation, I agree. Increasing our debt is really that's me clutching at straws, saying, okay, well, do we look at more debt then to try and make these rates go down? The real issue is councils living outside of their means and continually putting money into the projects that aren't waters and roading and the key infrastructure. And so I just look at these numbers and I go, it's just highlighting a bigger problem. It's not about depreciation and not funding our renewals of water. It's the fact that this council has spent lots of money on stuff, and there are some core issues that need to be caught up on. And I agree, we can't ignore those issues, but there's costs here that people can't afford. And going back to our conversations with audit around viability of councils, our ratepayers can't afford to keep doing this. And Steve's comments around the commercial can't afford to have 25%. Half the main street's just been knocked down. It's a bit of a joke to then go, well, our rates are going up higher. We're not offering them a lot for their rates at the moment. And I'm just feeling like, in terms of risk, there's a lot of risk and a lot of reputational risk and financial risk.
Thank you. I don't disagree with anything I said, but that's probably a discussion for council, not for this committee. But thank you. Absolutely, there's a risk, right?
We consider risk.
Yeah.
But there's nothing we can do about what's coming on 1 July.
Well, we vote to adopt a plan or not.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is I think what you can and can't do is a discussion for councillors. Our job today is not to debate the merits of any rate increase. I think that the comments have been received and acknowledged, which is the purpose of today. Marty.
So I have some questions on the draft. Yep. So the LTP audit identified an error in the Waka Kotahi funding. It was overstated by 600,000. Has that been corrected in the annual?
Yes, that was discussed at the previous workshop, and that was it didn't meet the materiality level.
No,
but
appreciate that. Yeah.
But that has been amended. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And the CapEx plan. The issue with any CapEx plan is often they're too aggressive. Are we satisfied that it's achievable? Usually it's not.
Maybe we could ask Johannes, but in terms of the side of it, we reviewed the CapEx the program as at December. Mm-hmm. We looked at the forecast and the plan, and we forecasted that capital expenditure plan. But as you say, there's always risk around the doability of that capital plan, and that's always something we monitor. But there is always some risk around that.
And the question so on the CapEx, always the maintenance, what's the level of deferred CapEx, the backlog? And is that a risk for, the temptation to, once again, to keep rate increasing down is to defer. Is there a risk associated with any deferral?
Ask Johannes.
Yeah. I can just stand up there, but we can hear you.
So at the previous 2 risk and assurance meetings, ago, we spoke about that we identified critical risk. In there, we identified the historical underinvestment in critical infrastructure. Currently, our asset management plan aims to improve our asset condition by 10% over 10 years, meaning that we would go roughly from, off the top of my head, probably from mid 30% poor assets to around mid 20% poor assets. So that gives you an idea that we're probably 20 years behind in terms of critical water infrastructure renewal. If we continue the current level investment, we will over 30 years, we will get to a place where we set 10% or less poor assets, which is desirable. In the meantime, we will be operating at a high risk model. So wouldn't recommend reducing or deferring any further capital renewals. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, and on just a small note, on the contents page, like the numbers are wrong and
Been amended.
that has been, okay. And also some of the Māori equivalents are still English.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? So,
Sorry, one last really quick question for you. With regards to the final page of the report, it talks about this rate affordability benchmark. The point I raised in the workshop last week was that we exist outside of that bill plus 2%. Is that something you see across the board in local government as common practice?
I wouldn't say common, but it's not abnormal, right? I would be looking at other indicators as well as to why are you doing it, and why was that bill plus set by council, because that's council's limit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, I mean, some councils, I would say, we are public, right? Put that number into predictions. Other councils take a different approach, a more, trying to have a reasonable target. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any further discussion? So we've got two recommendations there. Can I have a amendment to those recommendations? Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Marty. Seconded. You're on. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is 7.4, our risk management update, page 104. Thanks, Joey.
Oh, you're on your skirt. Yeah.
You're freed. You're tied, literally tied to the chair.
Sorry.
Right.
That looked like an emergency.
Yeah.
Maybe we had an emergency.
Yeah, he was calm for it. Yes, right. Twice. Yes. Right.
No, we're a different.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm just wondering, in the interest of time, whether we could escalate our emergency managers paper, which is 7.6, is it?
7.7 was the last item.
Yes, could we escalate that on?
Do that. All right. Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Right.
So jump to 7.7, page 138 with some significant reading there. Thank you.
Just to introduce firstly Simon Taylor, for those that don't know Simon, he's been appointed, as you would have read in the report, to the new Wairarapa Emergency Management Office. So technically once the recovery office winds up, but we're already flogging him and making him, technically you call it a transition period, so he's in his new job already. But going forward, so we'll be able to provide you with this regular report on emergency management, which will be great to be able to deliver that each quarter. So I'll hand over to Simon.
Thank you. He's conscious of time, right?
I'll keep it extremely brief because I think you've actually got quite a lot of information here. So huge. Kia ora koutou katoa. From a recovery office perspective, I think it's really only a couple of things I was going to cover off. The recovery office has been working. It has been working across Carterton. We have grant funding, flood funding that's been operating out at Flat Point, and we have also, as you'll read, containers at Flat Point. The office itself will be closing down the 30th of June, and any activities that are outstanding will go back into a BAU state or picked up by the new Emergency Management Office if we're just finalising things. From a EMO Shed office perspective, as Jerry alluded to, I'm working across the three councils, Master and South Wairarapa, so I will be helping to strengthen the emergency management response, which includes our controller network and our ability to respond at an emergency operations centre level, and boosting that and making sure we can professionalise our staff into training that they need to support, as it's a legislative responsibility. And finally, the last year at this time, you received a report, an after-action review report, which had 37 recommendations. Just reconfirming, 35 of them have been completed. The last 2 will be completed by the end of June, so that we will have met those obligations under that report, and that will be reported back to the next Audit and Risk Committee. That's probably all I was going to cover off because of interests of time, if that's sufficient, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's a lot. I think in the emergency management space, there's a lot happening. Right?
Yes.
And the question is, and it's a rhetorical question, right? How do we, as a council, ensure that we are doing what is appropriate, right? Considering all the risks that are actually facing us in terms of emergency management. Right? I don't know the answer. I don't expect anyone to know the answer at this stage, but that's what I think that, Jerry's talked about your future reporting. In my opinion, others might want to contribute to that. That's what I would certainly like to see is, what are the, in terms of the critical risks, and what's our obligation and how are we responding?
If I could comment or to answer perhaps your query, is that Remo also started capability reporting across our system. So that's from governance right down to operational capability, and we'll have that reporting on an annual basis going forward. So the system is building those checks and measures into saying how we're doing, how we're improving.
Yeah, and it's a journey of destination.
It certainly is. And for this forum, we're also going to be running an exercise next week, which has changed recently to a severe weather event based on the impact from last weekend. And for this one, we're including the mayors and deputy mayors so that they can continue to practice their responsibilities, which are legislative responsibilities during an event, and that we can interact in the right and appropriate mechanism. So this is all part of the training and upskilling across the region as well.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, Councillor Grace.
One point that I highlighted was going from 2 controllers to 7 in the area.
Yes.
Is that the end goal, or it's going to continue to grow over time?
Look, it's a significant starting point.
Yeah.
A controller is somebody who takes responsibility for the event or damage that's occurring pre-event as we wind into it, and taking ownership of the event happening. What we have is a 24/7 duty roster system. We had 2 people who were on call every week for 6 months until we could increase it to 3, and now we've got up to 7, which means that we're only rostered on once every 6 or 7 weeks. Significant difference for the types of events that are happening. And last winter, we were on call every Friday night because of severe flooding coming through, and that happened for a 2.5 month period. That was July, August into September. So it's not an end point, but it'll be a continuation. You will find that people will leave, will need to replace. Controllers are a starting point. We'll be looking at other functions through the EOS, the Emergency Operations Centre. That'll include all the functions like logistics, intelligence, planning. We are looking to professionalise to give people an opportunity to move into spaces that they're more comfortable, and then start expanding and building. So we have an interchangeable workforce, remembering that the 3 councils all operate in the EOC. So it's not just one council to provide all the staff. So we will be improving. It's not an end day.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's answered your question.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, Simon.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
And welcome,
Good job.
welcome to the new role that starts on the 1st of July, but thank you for doing us a free brief, right? We've got a recommendation there on page 147. Can I? Oh, we just received the report. Can I have a mover, please? You're on. Do I have a seconder? I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. Now we can go back in our agenda, backwards. 7.4, page 103. Thank you very much, Simon.
Yes, Simon.
So this is our regular update report on current risks. As noticed with the detail, I may have noticed attachment 1 was not attached. Within that, there's no change from our last meeting when you reviewed it. Most resourcing and effort at the moment is going into the top 4 risks around local order done well, organisational change, annual plan, annual report, and elections. So that's where our probably main focus in terms of staff resourcing is. And you will be obviously receiving reports and updates on the more detailed parts of those areas.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Chief Executive, I've got one following you. Right. In terms of water done well, have we actually now considered the LTP requirements as part of your risk matrix for local water done well?
Not yet, because council has not made any decision.
Yeah, I know.
Once they do, I'll consider it.
Right, but it's an emerging risk.
And if I had a recommendation for council considering that risk, I would go live date that aligns with the long-term plan to avoid a long-term plan amendment, but that will depend on the other participants in the entity.
So maybe I can assist if the other councils agree with that risk assessment. There could be agreement between some of those councils.
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right. That's not stopping us working towards that before, because I think the bit that worries me from a risk perspective is there are, and I'm speaking to a number of other people, they are looking at getting up and live from 1 July next year. That actually with the legislation does pose some significant tax risks as well, because tax provisions won't be in effect for quite some time. So they could be actually paying tax on their profits. Okay, so again, this is right. This is a problem with high-speed stuff. There's a whole lot of transition stuff that needs to be considered, right? And anything done at high speed is very high risk.
They're more likely to get a deduction for their losses, aren't they?
We could,
Yeah, well, the other issue is depending on the way the legislation is, you may not be able to claim those losses as well. So, there's a whole lot of, that's just one, right? And there are probably multiple risks if you're going early, right? Let's learn from someone else. All right, thank you for that, Chair. So we've got a recommendation on page 106 that we received the report. Thank you, Councillor Grace. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Steve. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Next item, 7.5, page 107. Health, safety and wellbeing update. Thanks, Jerry.
Again, in the interest of time, we'll just take the report as read, but just noted just earlier on briefly that probably the biggest organisational risk is really around the reviews. So we're doing a phased approach of a number of organisational reviews. So in terms of just delivery and staff, as managers are managing those staff within delivering that work, but still continue on with the organisational reviews. So it'll be across a number. I've highlighted a couple of teams here, but that will continue for a little bit as well, to include more staff. So yeah, probably those that areas is the uncertainty across the team at the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No questions? I've got one, Jerry. You're going to guess which one it is?
Contract,
Yes.
contractor audit.
Correct, absolutely. Yep, thank you.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
We are having, I mean, a lot of our bigger contract stores, those are being completed. It's probably the smaller ones that we sometimes don't hear about and catch them in time to do an audit. So, for example, the window washer that comes in one day and we miss seeing them. So we are aware that those aren't here.
Look, my question was, right, is there, what's the risk of actually not doing those audits, and is it significant? Right, and how do we mitigate it? Yeah.
I think the risk is an assurance, as you say, risk. So our Sitewise platform is giving us a really good pre-qual and baseline knowledge of their practice. And likewise, the big contractors, that is all part of the tender process as well, the procurement process. So there's the assurance that they are doing what they say they are going to do is the tick that we need. So, absolutely acknowledge that we haven't got to those this quarter. Okay. Likewise, you may have noticed an omission of speed reporting that we normally would do. Mm-hmm. We're just waiting for our car tracker to change over the new speeds. The system to catch up with the change in speed. So we did run the report, and we got a massive amount of speeding from 80, over the 80 Ks, which is now 100, of course. So we're just waiting for that to catch up. But we'll be able to apply that retrospectively, as we do. So we'll be able to bring that up.
Thank you for that.
I just had a question on your staff policies that have been reviewed. You mentioned substance and alcohol abuse policy. Yes. I wondered if you could just talk about any key takeouts or changes in that policy.
Yeah, we actually just were discussing yesterday. So probably the key changes, it's not a change, but I say we're reporting to you now around those post-incident testing. So we're continuing to enforce that those are mandatory, they're no longer discretionary as it was in the past, perhaps, which is great. And secondly, we are going to just considering pre-employment testing as mandatory for all roles, not just safety sensitive. So, from the accountant that sits in the office right across as well. I guess overall, we've been highlighting it for a couple of years now, so perhaps up in mind for staff more than in the past as well.
Okay. Thanks. No further questions. I've got one final one. Sure. Sensitive expenditure policy. Yes. Is that going to come to this committee? Because it's quite common for that to go to those committees. There are some councils that just do it.
Absolutely bring it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Because it actually does have implications, and it's something that our good friends audit will actually look at.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a recommendation on page 122. Do I have a mover? Move Mayor on. Do I have a seconder? No. Councillor Grace. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Very next item, Treasury Report, page 130. Last item.
Okay. I'll take the report as read.
Yep. And, that's fine, absolutely. Any questions?
Okay.
So can I summarise? We're actually totally compliant. 100%. Right. Thank you. All right. So we've got a recommendation here on page 125 that we received a report noting that the positioning complies with the limits.
Congratulations.
All right. So no questions. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Deputy Mayor Steve, seconded Councillor Grace. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. I think that concludes unless I've missed anything, that concludes the business of the councils. Thank you very much for your participation and your discussion today. It's been right. Thank you. And just no further closing comments from
Yeah,
anyone?
just one, just a vote of thanks to the staff and management, all the good reports.
Thank you.
Good night.
And next.
Yeah.
Especially about space weather.
Oh.
Never heard of it last week. Now we know.
Yeah, now we might know too much.
Bring it up all the time.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It comes from National Emergency Management Office all the time as space weather.
Mm.
That's it's their thing.
Yeah.
And to me, as we just, look, I read like everyone else and I go, oh goodness.
It's appropriate with dark skies.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might have long-term dark
Need to know
skies.
whether to book or not.
Yeah. Sorry? Right, right. Okay, so with no further business, close them karakia. Maria, thank you. Right.
Komo tua tātou mahi mo tēnei wā. Manakitia mai tātou i a tātou. Tātou hua, tātou whānau, tātou hapu. Makarakia whakamutaka nā nānei. Kia whakairia te tātou. Kia wā te ai te ai. Kia tūruhi whakatakai. Kia tūruhi whakatakai. Au e,
Thank you very much.